All right, everybody. Well, we are going to jump into week 2 of our study of the book of 1 Samuel. Now, you're going to notice our pace and think there's no way we're getting through all these chapters of 1 Samuel in 8 weeks. And you would be right. I am the pastor, and so I get to decide that I'm going to teach both semesters. So you're welcome to stay with me on both sides of spring break if you like. It'll take us that long to get through 1 Samuel, but it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it, and I've enjoyed studying it so far. So we studied 1 Samuel 1 last week. Can anybody give me maybe a couple of names, some characters that we met last week? If you remember just a name, throw it out there, and then we'll kind of riff off of that. Hannah, okay. Who was Hannah? Somebody help me out. Who was Hannah? Shannon, are you mouthing it just not loud enough and I can't hear it? Elkanah, yeah, Elkanah's wife, okay. What was unique about Hannah? What could she not do? Okay, couldn't have babies, couldn't have children. All right, and was she just beloved by everyone because of this and everybody felt bad for her? No. What happened? Who picked on her especially? The other wife, right? Peninnah. Right, kind of a mean, nasty lady. When was it like its worst? When did she pick on her the worst, most publicly? Once a year when they went to the temple. That's right. They went to make sacrifices at the temple. They called it temple, but it wasn't really the temple, but it was kind of their place of worship. Once a year they would gather together, and that was when it got awful. Right, everybody got together. And what were these temple gatherings like? Were they the holy gathering that God wanted it to be? No. What was wrong with it? Well, first of all, who was it being led by? All right, so Eli was the priest, and he had two sons, and the sons were good or bad priests? Real bad, okay? And so when everybody got together, they weren't worshiping as they should be, right? They were getting drunk. They were eating a lot, so much so that Eli looked at Hannah while she was praying and pleading to the Lord and thought that she was intoxicated. And so it was all bad, right? And he has to eventually apologize to her and then blesses her. And the blessing is that God opens up her womb and she has a son. And the son's name is Samuel, right? So, did she decide to keep Samuel forever all to herself? No, she dedicates Samuel to the Lord, and she promises that once he is weaned, she'll bring him back to the temple. And so this is where we are. She's weaned him, she's brought him back to the temple, and she is going to, we're going to get this, we call it a Magnificat, right? It's the same thing, really, that Mary prays in the New Testament in Luke. Caleb, Mr. Matt Smith just walked in right there. You're on, buddy. You're on. Get him a sheet. I'd love to see Matt run away from him and have to chase him with a sheet down the aisle, but that would have made my night. All right. So we're at the point where we're going to get the Magnificat. We're going to get Hannah's song praising God for giving her a child. So if you have your sheet there, we're going to fill that out as we go here in a minute. Look, if Jackson gets too fussy, I'll just take him up here. We'll roll together. He'll be good. All right, so as we read this, I want you to kind of see a couple things. First of all, the first verse is going to state that she prayed and kind of sang. This is her song that she gives to the Lord. And the structure of this is a Hebrew poem. All right, does anybody remember doing the Psalms? We talked about Hebrew poetry. Does anybody hear when we did that? All right, we said that there are kind of 2 types of Hebrew poetry. Do you remember? You guys remember? Okay, so some Hebrew poetry starts, okay, we got Morka walking in the back. We got the Pattons and then Courtney's back there. I think that's Courtney. I can't see that far. Maybe that's Greta. I'm not certain. It's Greta. Yeah? All right. Just making sure. So there's 2 types of Hebrew poetry. Some of it is where you have each letter of the alphabet, right? Starts the line. That's one way to do it. And then the second type is kind of a repeating pattern. That is a lot of times found in a chiasm, is kind of the word we use. We got Ethan right over here, and 2 more behind you. So a chiastic structure where the outsides kind of mirror one another and they get closer to the middle. And then within that same world, there's a repeating pattern. So this is going to fall into somewhat of the repeating chiastic structure. And it's going to start with the Lord's holy sovereignty in verses 1 through 3. and then a reversal of human fortunes in verses 4 and 5. Then again, the Lord's holy sovereignty in verses 6 and 7. And then the first half of verse 8 is another reversal of human fortune. And then 8b through 10a is going to be the Lord's holy sovereignty again. And then lastly, it changes to a kingship theme. So it's kind of the same, and then boom, completely different right at the end. Which is really odd because does Israel have a king? It doesn't. Has God even begun to promise them a king? No. So it kind of leaves you wondering why there's this kingship element to it. Almost like God was looking towards Mary, right? Just something to hold on to. Okay, so let's read verses 1, 2, and 3 together. And Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exults in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none beside you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed." All right, let's talk about the pieces of this, first of all. The first major point here is the Lord's favor falls on the humble. The Lord's favor falls on the humble. We would absolutely agree that Hannah has been humbled in this, correct? Based on what she's gone through for years, right? Because it describes year after year after year going, and her counterpart having had another child and another child and another child, and it's almost like you can imagine her going, Hannah, you're getting so far away on the other side of all the children that I have. What's wrong with you, right? So it's getting worse and worse by the year, and she's grieved more and more, and she's been humbled by her circumstances. So in her humility and in her prayer, God looks on her with favor. And she recognizes immediately that God is, as she begins to write this, the very first thing is that God's the one who gets credit for delivering her. So as a first kind of action point, I've kind of put it here, that we are called to delight in God's deliverance. Delight in God's deliverance. Verse 1, Hannah rejoices in the salvation of the Lord, who has delivered her from her sadness through Samuel. There's no question about where her delight comes from. It only comes from the Lord. She says, in 3 ways, my heart exults in the Lord, my horn is exalted to the Lord, and my mouth derides my enemies. Let's look at those 3 statements where she is expressing her personal, emotive thankfulness to God. Her personal, emotive thankfulness to God. And what she is doing is and it's the only time she does it in the whole song, in the whole stanza, she talks about how she feels, what God has done for her heart. It's okay that we pour our hearts out to God. It's okay that we tell him how we feel. But what she doesn't do is center the prayer on her emotions. Even though she's talking about her emotions, it's still centered on God. Look at the first thing. She said that Hannah's heart-filled emotions worshiped the Lord. The very first thing she says, my heart exults in the Lord. The very first thing she does is that it drives her to go to God and thank him. That's the very first thing she does. There's a second part of this, though. It's not just an outward kind of a heart song or a feeling that comes to her. There's also Hannah's dignity involved in this. She says, my horn is exalted in the Lord. Now, this is not like my horn has pierced the sky, right? If you like The Office, you might pick that reference up. This isn't that. This horn is something else entirely. Chad, was that for you? Okay, I'm glad you enjoyed that. So this horn is, it's an image, or it's a representative of something else. She doesn't literally have a horn standing there, okay? This is where cultural references, this is where if you're reading scripture and you're just struggling to pick something up, grab a commentary, like find something. There's free ones online, and try to figure out what some of these images mean, because if you go and look at that pretty quickly, you come to understand that this horn is a representative in that time of dignity. Now, what has been just absolutely decimated? year after year after year after year. Her dignity has, right? It represents strength, pride, and even possibly has future eyes towards kingship. And and that thing that she has, that dignity, that strength, that pride, it is exalted where? In her? No, in the Lord. So she takes her worship, her exaltation goes towards the Lord. Her dignity is not in herself, but it is wrapped up within the Lord. And then lastly, we have this kind of an odd phrase, my mouth derides my enemies. Derides, that's a weird word, right? It's a little bit of an odd term. We've got a couple of odd terms here, but especially my mouth derides my enemies. This, again, goes to kind of a turn of phrase. All right, a turn of phrase to be used. The turn of phrase goes with this idea of someone swallowing up their enemy. It's a figurative phrase to suggest overcoming her enemies and now rejoicing in the victory. Think of it like a holy version of a touchdown dance over somebody that tried to tackle you in the end zone and you caught the pass over their head. Right? It's a holy version of that. It is that your mouth is open wide over the failure of your foe, so much so that your celebration swallows up everything else they've done up to that point. And why is Hannah able to do that? Not because of anything she's done, but because in her worship and in her dignity being wrapped up in God, now she has the ability to be freed from being swallowed up from her enemy, who has swallowed her up to this point. Every year, she loud-mouthed blabbers about how much better she is than Hannah. And God looks on that heart, a heart that is not self-focused, but worships him, a heart that puts the dignity of that person in the Father, and then a heart that gives him the glory in that victory, looking at the victory over the enemy. So that's how we delight in God's deliverance. All these statements are meant to be her kind of progressive response to God's faithfulness. There's a second thing we see here in verse 2, and we're called to celebrate God's holiness. Look at verse 2. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. All right, we're going to break this down into three different pieces. First of all, though, we're going to see that God's deliverance for Hannah demonstrates for her the faithfulness of his character in a way like no one else. That was kind of our next blank there. God's deliverance for Hannah demonstrates for her the faithfulness of his character in a way like no one else. This is how she describes him there. First of all, Hannah affirms the incomparability of the Lord. Nobody compares to him. This is the first statement. There is none holy like the Lord. When she begins to praise him, it's not that she says, oh, you're a little bit better, I'm still considering. She's saying there's nobody like God. Nobody, period. He is the one, he is the only. Second, Hannah affirms the unique nature of the Lord. For there is none besides you. So there's no one like you, right? No one has the characteristics of God. No one resembles him. No one has victory like he does. So he's solitary. He's singular in his own that way. But there's also no other, she's saying there's no other option to you. It's not just that no one's like you. There's no other option than you. So Hannah affirms the unique nature of God. None is of the same essence as him. That's, again, very, very important, especially when the people around her are worshiping not just God, but also the false gods around them too. And then a third piece here, Hannah affirms the protection and strength of the Lord. There's this phrase, there is no rock like our God. This isn't like that we're reading in the New Testament. In the New Testament, God tells Peter that he's the rock on whom he'll build the church. So that's kind of baked in for us. There's a little bit of insider language. We understand, God's got this thing for rocks, right? You build a firm foundation on rock, not on sand. Jesus is the cornerstone. We are the bricks around it. So we get the imagery of a rock, but for her, she needs that. She's not had that. She said nothing firm to put her footing on. And she could, if she was not careful, put her worth in what? What did she get that she's always wanted? A child. How many people put their worth in their children? Their value in their children, or what kind of parent they turn out to be. I mean, my goodness, 6 kids in, I can't imagine gauging my worth by how my children feel about me or how they turn out. That's a terrifying prospect. There is, don't tell them, there is, Caleb, Audrey, plug your ears. We have zero control. Okay, you can open them now. Truly, the Lord has to do it. The Lord has to control someone's heart. The Lord has to convict. At the end of the day, He is the one. And so whether it's your kids that you put value in, your friends, your value at work, whatever it is that is your foundation, there is no foundation like the Lord. And that's the third thing that Hannah's acknowledging. So she's saying, God is incomparable. No one has faculties like Him. No one looks like Him. No one loves and provides like He does. He's substantively different. There's no one besides Him. He's it. He's her everything. And He is her foundation. He's her rock. He's her protection and strength. 3 elements are there. Then there's another piece to this in her kind of response to God before she addresses those around her. And I think the call for us too is that we bow to God's holiness. We bow to God's holiness. What does that mean? Well, it means that we submit to it. Look at verse 3. Talk no more so very proudly. Now, clearly she's addressing someone, right? Let not arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by Him actions are weighed. Peninnah and other lost people as a stand-in for her, right? We take her or put any lost or enemy of God in this position, should not speak so arrogantly before the Lord. For He truly knows all and knows the insecurities of their hearts. He strikes at that insecurity, but He provides for His children. That's what we see in verse 3. These people that talk so proudly, right? They're so arrogant. They have everything figured out in the world. But God knows their heart, and He knows their actions, and it says that He weighs it. That's terrifying. Hannah warns her enemies, cease your arrogance against God. She's saying, look, you ought to see by now, everything you have valued is gone. God can do that, by the way. God can do that. He can take value and remove it in a second. Can He not? Let's just play this out for a minute. We have a really, really good example. Please don't take this to say approve or disapprove, okay? Politicize or not politicize. I'm using this as an example because it's an overnight issue. There was a president of a foreign country in Venezuela who one day was president, and in 3 minutes, he goes from being president of an oil-rich country to being in jail. It can be taken away in an instant. But it's not just taken away by outsiders. It can be taken away by sin. We have a guy named Philip Yancey, who is just a Christian author who had written for years and years and has lots of influential books. And last week it comes out that he's had an 8-year extramarital relationship with someone not his wife. And he's dying of Parkinson's, and he's in his late 70s. And all that influence, all those words, all those books, it's like a vapor. In an instant, it can be gone. And Hannah's telling her, Benaniah, just as we would tell anybody else, stop. Stop your arrogance. It is so foolish to be arrogant in front of the living God. And her song is not just a song of rejoicing to God. It has more value than that. It is a prayerful, I won't call it a sermon, but is a prayerful plea with the people around her. And it's a plea that we can pray too. God, protect me from my own arrogance. Why? Because God protects His children, and He looks on those and weighs their actions who boast arrogantly. Hannah assures them that God is knowledgeable of their actions, and He weighs them. That's terrifying. It's not just that God sees and is uninterested in you. God sees your actions and weighs them. And when weighed against his righteousness, I mean, we have to be completely innocent. We're not. That's why we need a Jesus, right? So that he can be innocent for us, so that he takes our sin, he takes our shame, and he puts it underneath his payment for our sins so that we might be saved. All right, so this is we wrap up that whole first concept of the Lord's favor falling on the humble. And as a part of this humility, someone who is humble ought to be looking to those around them who once were in a haughty place and now are down low. And instead of laughing at them, even in being able to celebrate in God's victory, to still look with a heart of compassion. Could not have Hannah said, forget that, I'm good now, right? Her mouth was open wide over her enemy. But instead, she pleads with her to repent. And probably the others that are there too have joined in. Second piece, though, we see in verses 4 through 8, is the Lord's favor reverses the plans of the world. The Lord's favor reverses the plans of the world. Look at verse 4. The bows of the mighty men are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. So now we get into a portion where we're going to move a little bit quicker because much of this is repetitive for the point of kind of driving home the same point over and over. And it's this, that God has the ability and the sovereignty to change fortunes and reverse them really on the turn of a dime. Right? On a very, very small course correction, he can do what he wants. Verse 4, we see, shows the Lord weakens the strong and supports the weak with his strength. God weakens the strong and supports the weak with his strength. Now, while this is, kind of very specifically applicational to their situation, right? To Peninnah's and to Hannah's and Elkanah, and they're still there with the priest and kind of worshiping, and she's writing this song in worship, so everybody is still there. It is also applicational for us too. Why would we say these things still hold true? Who teaches this way? Almost using words that are almost just like this in the New Testament. Who teaches this way? Think about it. Think of the book of Matthew, somewhere around chapter 5. Somebody talks like this a lot. Must have been Jesus, right? Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the weak. Blessed are the meek. Why? Because God makes them strong. Isn't that what we get? Up until now, there's been none of this language. Or at least an expectation. I mean, maybe you could argue a little bit with like Moses and the deliverance and from slavery to now being in the land. There's some language of like the people in Canaan being dominated by God's people in Joshua, but not in like a turn of phrase like this. I mean, Hannah is almost exactly presenting what's going to happen in Jesus, is she not? She is praying like, Lord, weaken the strong and support the weak with his strength. Second, in verse 5, God reverses the fortune of people. He says, those who were full have hired themselves out for bread. But those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. A reversal in fortune. And again, in verse 5, the barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. So forlorn, what would that mean in this sense? Sad, right? Why is she sad, do you think? There's another word for that is for the Hebrew words there's withered. She's withered. She's not having children anymore. That's why she's forlorn. This person who is abundantly having children, God turns it off. We just read about this in our Bible reading plan. Anybody going through Bible reading plan, right? Who did we just read about that was having kids and then God turned the spigot off, and then somebody else started having kids and then God turned the spigot off, and then a slave woman was having kids and God turned the spigot off, and then another slave woman had kids and then God turned the spigot off, and then went back to the original and kind of turned it back on? Who was that? Anybody remember? Leah, and sister was Rachel, and husband was Jacob. All right, you guys are doing good, right? You're following along. It's kind of hard to follow those names, but you have Leah, who was the first wife, and then Rachel, who is the second, and then you get the two servants that serve from there. And God is just kind of on and off again, allowing them to have children or not have children, right, as they move along. Do you have a question? Rich and the poor, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the parable of Lazarus, the poor man and the rich man who goes to heaven, and the rich man goes to hell and says, "Wait, I thought I was going to get to heaven," and the poor man goes to heaven, and he just begs to have water from the dip from the tip of his finger. Yeah, it's a good comparison. So there's clearly some comparatives being made to what Jesus is going to bring later, and really a theme that's building in the entire Bible. Is this theme going to build in the book of 1 Samuel? Would you say maybe at some point in time that Saul is rich and David is poor, the outcast son out in the field as the shepherd? We might, wouldn't we? Do their fortunes reverse? They do, don't they? What about in David's life? When he's on the highest of highs, does he fall? Absolutely. Does God replace him? He does. So God regularly is going to allow high, low, high, low, high, low, not high, ho, high, ho, high, low, high, low, except with one king, with King Jesus. He never falls. He never falters. He starts low and goes high. And the height is the heavens, right? He's born in a manger. But when he comes back, he won't be derided. He won't be decried. He won't be forlorn. He'll be exalted. All right, sorry, we digressed there a bit. Verse 6, the Lord also holds total authority over life and death. He holds total authority over life and death. The Lord kills and brings to light. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. All right, Sheol is the name that they have used, the name they used in the Old Testament to represent death and eternal death, where people go when they're separate from God. Now, they don't exactly have some of the theology of hell like we have because of some of the descriptors we get later and also in the New Testament, but they know there has to be something opposite of Abraham's bosom, which is the description, right? To be with the high God, the high king, the Lord of hosts. What is the opposite of that? Well, it's to be cast down away from him, and they call that Sheol. So he's saying that God has the authority to bring life and death, and God has the authority to separate those from him and to send them to Sheol. The Lord reverses the fortune of people. The Lord holds total authority over life and death. And then in verse 7 and 8, we see the Lord holds total authority over human fortunes. I mean, here on earth, this is a description of people who are alive, right? Makes poor and makes rich, brings low and exalts, raises up the poor from the dust, lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. Hannah is saying God is capable of anything. Her song is completely and totally exalting God as having authority over life and death and total authority over human forces. Nothing happens outside of God's will for her. So God honors in her the humility of her prayer, right? Recognize the humility of her prayer. And God then reverses her fortunes, and she uses this as kind of a point to praise that this is part of God's character, is that God takes the things of the world and changes them and twists them and turns them for his pleasure. So she's kind of uses this a way to teach as well and to show how God's character is. And then lastly, we see the Lord's favor wins the ultimate battle. God's favor, the thing that they are fighting for, the thing that she prayed for, God's favor was the ultimate thing that she gives credit for the victory. It's not herself, it's not her prayer, it's God, the God Most High. Verse 9 and 10. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. All right, so we'll leave that horn language right on the end because we'll come back to that. We've heard that already, right? What did we say that represented? Dignity, strength, honor, all those things, right? So we'll kind of hold that and get back to that. But for now, let's talk about how the Lord wins favor with the ultimate battle. First of all, in verse 9, the Lord sets straight paths of his people, but the paths of his wicked will not prevail over him. Let's talk about that for a minute. It says he's going to guard the feet of his faithful ones. That is, he is going to keep someone from misleading them off of his path. God holds ultimate authority to win the battle, right? If he says it, it happens. Hannah's saying God had authority over her body, right? God had authority over her body so that when she went and God's man saw her and spoke on God's behalf, it happened. That is to be ultimately convinced that God can do what he wants to do. We get personal about our bodies. Well, nobody can make me do anything. I mean, I don't like it when somebody makes me sick. You ever had a baby sneeze in your mouth? It's gross. I don't like when somebody makes me sick. It's not fun. It feels violating in some way. But God has way more power and authority over us than, allowing us to get sick that way. He reaches in and changes things. He pulls out Adam's rib and makes woman. He opens and closes wombs. Jesus later, what does Jesus specialize in? Healing, right? Jesus specializes in healing. Why do you think he specialized in healing? Was it because a bunch of people needed to be physically healed? Was that the reason? No. Jesus didn't have to heal people to show he was good or kind. He didn't heal them because there were just a bunch of people that were sick. Because there were always, what's he say? They're always going to be what? Sick. In this world you will have trouble. That where I am, you also. Right? So there's always going to be trouble. There's always going to be sick people. There's always going to be those in need. So why does he heal them? He heals to show he has authority and that God has given him authority. And Hannah's preaching the same message, that God has authority and the wicked will not prevail over him. Second thing here in verse 10, we see the Lord's plan is to one day bring all under his power, his authority, and his kingship. The Lord's plan is to one day bring all under his power, authority, and kingship. How does this happen? The adversaries of the Lord shall, one, be broken to pieces. These are all, I think, different things, by the way, right? So he says, they will be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in the heavens. He will judge to the ends of the earth, and he will give strength to the king. So your first two lines are the first two of verse 10. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in the heavens. The Lord will break his enemies. She's saying this now. All right. In the garden, we just talked about this on Sunday, there is a curse put on the serpent. He says you'll slither all the days of your life, right? You'll be below all the rest of the animals. He says you will what? The last thing, you will bruise what? The heel of the descendant of Adam, right? Through Eve. And what's the offspring going to do? Will crush his head. Right? You will strike his heel, you'll bruise his heel, he'll crush your head. Crush, break, type of very similar terminology, very similar language. Is it almost like there's a divine author behind Hannah's hand? It's almost like there's a divine author who started in Genesis 3 and also kind of pinned in this little detail about, oh yeah, he's going to break his enemy. And then this message about the kingship we'll get at the end. So first of all, the Lord will break his enemy. That's how God is going to bring them under his power and authority and kingship. God brings them under his power by breaking them. Second, the Lord will judge the ends of the earth. This is that third statement we get. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. What is she, like, she's worried about Peninnah, right? Isn't Hannah worried about Peninnah? All she's worried about is these people that are there. Why are we getting this word about to the ends of the earth? I think it's because we are now far beyond whether she's had a child or not had a child. God has clearly put a pen in her hand to write something prophetic and special here. And what a promise to us, right? That God was thinking, even in the priest anointing a new child to come into the temple, who was going to bring into the world Saul and bring into the world David and anoint and also kill the wicked of the world, and to be a picture of the one who is to come. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will look and he will declare wicked, faithful, righteous, unrighteous. Not coincidentally, but providentially, that's what Samuel's job is going to be to do, is it not? Samuel's going to come and he's going to say, Saul, you're done. He's going to judge him unrighteous. He's going to say, David, you're in. The Lord told me it's you. It's you. Not you in the honeypot. It's just you. And lastly, he will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. The Lord will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. All right, so let's go back and redefine that horn. That starts with the word, starts with a duh. What is it? The horn signifies dignity. How is God going to give strength to his king and exalt the dignity of his anointed one? What's eventually going to happen to his king? He's going to die. Does he stay dead? No. What God is eventually going to do is he is going to send a king of kings, a king of David, a king of Saul, a king after his own heart, a king that is a true king and a king forever. And God, as he gives strength to Jesus and exalts his dignity or his strength of his anointed one, the one who has come, not just Saul, not just David, which God is going to do, but when God truly honors Jesus, his favor, God's favor on the Son, right? I use that word very specifically. He says when Jesus comes up out of the water at the baptism in Mark and also in Matthew and Luke for that matter, what does he say? What's he say? This is my Son in whom I am pleased. There's also a translation that says, on whom I what? You might have on whom my favor rests. Right? In whom I am pleased, on whom my favor rests, depends on what your translation is. That word favor, that is very, very important. God is pleased with Jesus. And although from an earthly perspective, he is derided, like Hannah, he is broken, like Hannah, he is redeemed, he is anointed, and all the things that are true about Hannah, right? She's maligned, she's beaten, she's broken, she's derided. After the fact, her horn is exalted, her mouth praises God, and her mouth is open over her enemies. The same can be said about Jesus. So this is kind of a neat little snapshot we get. Before we get into a lot of the history of Israel that we'll get into in the next couple of weeks, we get this really neat snapshot about what's to come. Is that not encouraging and cool? We don't know these little gems are in there in the Bible if we don't read it all the way through. You can just jump right over and miss the thing, and all of a sudden you're left asking questions. Here's the good news. If you have a good study Bible, this stuff's in there. And a lot of times. A lot of this is in there. Get a good study Bible if you don't have one. Just with really good long notes at the bottom. Like you want less text at the top of the page than there are notes at the bottom. They're really helpful. A lot of times they're really succinct and you don't get lost in the pages, right? Get a good study Bible. If you're ready to jump beyond that, get a commentary on the book of the Bible. A really, really expensive commentary is $60 or so. That's the high end. They're in the $10, $15, $20 range. You can get a good commentary for that. And if you don't mind it and you want to get a really nice commentary, go get one used. Somebody else has already highlighted it for you. They picked out all the good stuff. I don't sleep on used commentaries. That's a great way to get a good commentary. People get rid of them all the time. People are getting rid of their libraries, are paring down. Find a preacher that's getting ready to retire and just go rate it. They want to give it away. They want it to be used. Yeah? Yeah, or go to the Goodwill. Yes, absolutely. They're giving away Jesus books at Goodwill all the time. People they don't value it enough. All right. So we've kind of got to the end of the teaching portion. What questions do we have tonight? I want you guys to be thinking about questions as we go through here and ask them as we jump through. And I sped through really the second half a little bit just because it's somewhat repetitive. But what questions do you have? Well, I think let's look at the last verse, right? So the last verse says, "Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, and the boy was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli the priest." Clearly, it's meant to be understood she did this there. So I would assume there's probably a public nature to it of some kind. And the fact that it's shared publicly later, right? I mean, this is kept in the annals of history for that reason. So probably so. That's a good question, though. What other questions? Other thoughts? Any observations, something maybe we didn't touch on, or some that you've read in this before you love? All right. I'm going to give you a going, gone in a minute. Miss Christy, you got one? No? All right, David, you good? All right, our minds at ease? Okay. Well, we're going to pray, and we'll be dismissed here in just a minute. Next week is the rest of chapter 2. I can tell you in just a second specifically. Let's see. 1 Samuel, not Genesis. That's Sunday morning series. Well, I've got them broken down. 1 Samuel, yes. 2:11 through 36, and then the next week is 3:1 through 4:1. Correct. Yeah, we'll do all of Eli's sons next week. Real special gem of a persons they are. Real sweethearts. They lose the Ark of the Covenant. I'll just go ahead and spoil the story for you. They're so wonderful, they lose the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, you still have to come next week, Chad. Around losing the Ark of the Covenant? You got one job to do. Don't let the Philistines take the Ark of the Covenant. You ever seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, or the Raiders of the Lost Ark, sorry. Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Yeah, what happens to the Nazis in that movies happens to the Philistines, basically. They store it in a house, and like everything just starts to rot and burn down. Here, please, take this back. Will you please take it back from us? Right. All right. Let's go to the Lord in prayer and thank him for his word and the ability to study together, all right? God, thank you for the prayer of Hannah and what it teaches us about how you love the destitute, how you love those who are humble, how you take and deliver them, how you turn fortunes, how you put your kingship on your son and anointed him and his dignity and his strength. God, thank you that we get to enjoy his love and sacrifice forever in us. And we just ask for wisdom as his children and as the body being built up, that we might live out this in the kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven, as you call us to. It's in your name we pray. Amen. You guys are dismissed.